Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. I did some research, some very interesting research on a man called Wilder Graves Penfield, who was a American-Canadian neurosurgeon who was known as the father of modern neurosurgery. Penfield became famous for his groundbreaking work with epilepsy patients using a method called the Montreal procedure. He operated on awake patients while stimulating different parts of the brain with electrodes, which allowed him to map the brain in real time, linking specific areas of the brain to movement, sensation, memory, and speech. Penfield's work gave us the first clear maps of brain function. Beyond medicine, Penfield was deeply interested in human consciousness and the mind. Through the decades of surgeries, he noticed something. He noticed that he could trigger sensations, movements, and even vivid memories by stimulating the brain. However, what he could never figure out how to trigger was abstract thought. Abstract thought is basically thinking about ideas that aren't tied to something you can see or touch. An abstract thought would be something like, what is fairness? Or what does freedom mean? And this led Penfield to suggest that the mind or soul, for I guess maybe lack of a better term, it is the soul, I feel. It led him to suggest that the mind or the soul may be something more than just the brain alone. Mashallah. Penfield wrote in one of his studies, "There is no area of gray matter, as far as my experience goes, in which local epileptic discharge brings to pass what could be called mind action. There is no valid evidence that either epileptic discharge or electrical stimulation can activate the mind. If one stops to consider it, this is an arresting fact. The record of consciousness can be set into motion, complicated though it is, by the electrode or by epileptic discharge. An illusion or interpretation can be produced in the same way, but none of the actions we attribute to the mind has been initiated by electrode stimulation or epileptic discharge." Astaghfirullah. If there was a mechanism in the brain that could do what the mind does, one might expect that the mechanism would betray its presence in a convincing manner by some better evidence of epileptic or electrode activations. So let's break this down. No seizure can trigger mind action. Penfield says that when seizures or electrical stimulation hit the brain, they never cause abstract thinking, only things like sensations, movements, emotions, or memories. Nothing like reasoning, deciding, or creating ideas comes out of it. Consciousness can be played back. Using an electrode, Penfield learned that he can replay an experience in a human. Like memory, a sound, a smell, almost as if he's pressing play on a recording in the brain. The main point is here that he was never able to create new thoughts or new decisions. Illusions can be produced, but not true thought. He discovered that with electrodes you can stimulate the brain to trick it into interpreting something incorrectly, like sensory illusion, but it never initiates genuine abstract thought. And remember, abstract thought is something that's non-material. It's an ethic. It's thinking in ethics or analytical thinking. If the brain alone produced the mind, it should show itself. Penfield argued that if there really was a mind mechanism inside the brain, we would expect seizures or electrode stimulation to sometimes trigger things like reasoning, judgment, or decision-making. But after thousands of operations, he never saw it happen. What Penfield is getting at here is that the brain is like a hardware. Things like electrodes and seizures can activate circuits such as movement, memory, and sensations. However, the mind seems to be the software. The mind clearly does something beyond what the hardware can produce on its own. Overall, Penfield is suggesting that the mind, or soul, isn't just another brain function, it might be something completely separate. In a research article by Mind Matters, Michael Egnor, a neurosurgeon, says that, or he quotes, but Penfield noticed that in probably hundreds of thousands of different individual stimulations, he never once stimulated the power to reason. He never stimulated the intellect. He never stimulated a person to do calculus or to think of an abstract concept like justice or mercy. All the stimulations were concrete things. Move your arm, or feel a tingling sensation, or even a concrete memory. Like you remember your grandmother's face or something. But there was never any abstract thought stimulated. And Penfield said, hey, if the brain is the source of abstract thought, once in a while putting an electrode current on some part of the cortex, I ought to get an abstract thought. He never did, ever. So he said that the obvious explanation for that was the abstract thought doesn't come from the brain. In another part of the article, Egnor emphasizes the idea that Penfield did vast research on epilepsy as well. He went into the idea in question that Penfield came up with. Why are there no intellectual seizures? Nobody has calculus seizures. Nobody has seizures where they can't stop being logical. He said, why is that? If arithmetic and logic and all that abstract thought come from the brain, every once in a while you ought to get a seizure that makes it happen. So he asked rhetorically, why are there no intellectual seizures? His only answer was, because intellect doesn't come from the brain. Lastly, this is Penfield's third and final main line of reasoning. During neurosurgery, Penfield would ask the patient to move their arm. He would tell them, while he was working on their brain, whenever you want, move your right arm. Then the person, of course, would move their right arm. But once in a while, he would stimulate a part of the brain that made the right arm move, and of course, the right arm would move. Then he would ask them, I want you to tell me when I'm making your arm move and when you're moving your arm without making me do it, or without me making you do it. And then he said, tell me if you can tell the difference. And interestingly enough, the patients were always able to tell the difference. The patient knew that when Penfield stimulated their arm, he was doing it, not them. And when they stimulated their arm, they were doing it, not Penfield. Because of this finding, Penfield said that he couldn't stimulate a person's will. He was never able to trick the patient into thinking it was them doing it themselves. This brings us to the conclusion that the brain is not the mind is not the brain. Intellect and human will do not come from the brain. The human will is not something that you can stimulate, thus meaning that it cannot be a material property of the brain. It's likely something entirely different. Mashallah. I just thought, I think it's just interesting that based on neuroscience, you can predict the presence of a soul. Alhamdulillah, subhanallah.